of truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of St. Joseph. It is Catholic Family Men Monday, where we primarily direct the content to men, most especially to those of us who are called to the vocation of marriage and family, in order to build up husbands and fathers in Christ, to bless the family and sanctify the world. But make no mistake, everyone is certainly most welcome to listen in and or watch. Plenty here that is valuable and applicable to all. Our guest today is Steve Pokorny. He's a Catholic husband and father, the founder of Freedom Coaching, freedom-coaching.net, and the author of Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture. And that's our topic today, Redeemed Vision Part 2. This is the second in what we have scheduled as a three-part series corresponding to the three parts of the book. We had Part 1 last month, Part 2 today, Part 3 in May, God willing. Steve Pokorny, thank you so much for being back with us today. How are you?
I'm great, Jim. Great to be back with you and all of your audience.
Yeah, great blessing to have you here. And before we get going today, can you just share a bit more to reintroduce folks, or for those who might be listening to you for the first time on here, reintroduce them to your work at freedom-coaching.net, what that's all about?
Sure. Thanks so much. So I was hooked on pornography for over 12 years. I like to say 12 years a slave, and God had other ideas with my life of thinking. I had been thinking that this would be the rest of my life, and God set me on a path of great healing. In the midst of that, discovered that it's not just meant for me. It's meant for the world. And so a whole process has been developed through that. Founded in 2011 was Freedom Coaching. And from there, other men and women have come to join us in the work that we're doing. We currently have 6 other coaches worldwide who are working with this. And we serve globally clients in many places. Just this morning, I was meeting with a gentleman in Singapore. So it's interesting. It's 13 hours ahead of where we're at. So we get to see some of the most broken men and women come to us, not knowing what to do with their lives, and then getting them to be living the life that calls them to live, which is a genuine sexual integrity. And that's the big payoff for us, and getting to see them, their lives utterly restored, redeemed, and then sent out to do the work that they're called to live in.
Praise God. Yeah, in a little bit in the show, we will open up the phone line. So if anybody has any questions along these lines, you'll have the opportunity to call in, but you can also go to freedom-coaching.net to learn more. Steve, reset for us the image that you go back to time and time again in your book, this image of drinking from the septic tank. What is that all about? Why is it important for us what is the lesson in that image that's important for us to see?
It's a pretty potent image, isn't it, Jim? Right? And anybody who knows what a septic tank is, right, would never want to go there and drink. And the idea is, the analogy that I give and I use is that of which we're walking along. It's hot. Right, we do anything to satisfy our thirst, and this is the world we live in. Right, puts a lot of pressure on us, especially as men. Right, and we're trying to take care of our marriages, our families. Right, we're trying to do what we want to do, and life gets hard sometimes, and we want to just quench this deep yearning and desire in us, and the world proposes to us images that seem to be that image of fresh water, but in fact, what it is a septic tank, and we don't know it at the time. We dive in, we guzzle from it, and then you can only drink from a septic tank long enough until you start throwing up. And this is the place where we're in. And what's even what compounds the problem even more, Jim, is the fact that we are told that this is normal, and that everybody else is throwing up around us, right? That's just normal also. Well, if we're looking from the divine lens of what life is supposed to be, the septic tank was never normal. It was never what it was meant to be. That there, and this is where the bad news becomes good news. That there actually is fresh water that can quench our deepest desires here. The problem is, though, do we have the eyes to see it? And many of us just don't.
Talking about Steve Pokorny's book today, Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture. We got into part 1 on the last show, the diagnosis. We're going into part 2 today, the delivery system. And you begin with a love story like no other. And you say this, quote, "The drama God has in store for us is a love story greater than anything Hollywood could conjure up. In the deepest realms of our hearts, that place where only God can see, we know mere union with another person will not satisfy us. The most attractive human being cannot fulfill us because we are made for more. God is the more, and he wants us to enter into the greatest love story ever told, our own," end of quote. And this is where we're going today. Really, the fulfillment of that image of drinking from the septic tank is something that we're going to get into later in the show, which is the well that is to satisfy our every thirst. That's Jesus Christ, you say, giving us the fresh water that enables us to love as God loves. As I was reading this quote from this section on a love story like no other, and as I kept reading on, I guess it's just because it's the most prominent example in our popular culture right now, but that would be the Will Smith slap. That kept coming to mind as an example for a lot of this. The anger that came out on that evening out of Will Smith, really, I think, being upset over a view of sexuality that he and his wife hold, which is an unfaithful view, a septic tank sort of view. And so then you see this outburst of anger, but then you hear him accepting the award where he's saying, "I want to be a vessel of love." So you can see this tension there. I think, instead of condemning him, it's good to try to understand what is going on here and maybe see some of that in what is going on around us, what is going on with this tension within ourselves, sort of can we fall into this septic tank mentality to some degree at least? And, are we still, is there still this longing deep within to be somehow into a deeper sense of love at the same time? These two things don't go together, but a lot of times there is this tension, and there's a lot that you lay out that really kind of fleshes this out. Anything you want to speak to that, Steve?
Yeah, and I was. It's interesting you bring up the Will Smith, Chris Rock. We'll call it a fiasco or event, however you want to do it. Right? There is on the one hand, right, there's something on a basic level, right, Jim. If you and I were at a bar and somebody insulted our wives, right, the idea in typical masculinity before it's become so effeminized in many cases was to get up and defend our wives, right? And then obviously the context here is a very public place where that's going on in many cases, that wouldn't be appropriate in a certain sense. But there's something in us that wants to do this. We want to defend what's good, true, and beautiful. And then we look at the background, we pull back the curtain a little bit, and this is public knowledge again. So this isn't anything of scandal that we're speaking here. Just the fact that from a Christian perspective, the Catholic perspective, their own marriage is scandalous in the sense they have publicly come out and saying that they are having an open marriage. And I've read some other elements here that of Will Smith that there's been this longing, this searching that of trying to figure out, trying to get his life together. That things don't look all perfect from like an Instagram perspective or social media or things like that. And obviously they have, he's one of the most recognizable and I should say likable actors in Hollywood. But it looks like there's a lot of brokenness in the background there. So you have that going on there. And given obviously Chris Rock is he's an entertainer. He's throwing jokes there. It's maybe not the most tasteful of jokes that was thrown out there, given the fact that Jada Smith is dealing with a disease, that she's beyond her control there. So definitely a low blow that went on there. But with this here, I think this when our sexuality is not lived out as gift, the way in which it's designed, right? We're designed to live out our bodies and sexuality as gift, as a genuine, sincere gift of love. Then what's going to happen is other areas of our life are going to, if we're not living that way, are also going to express disordered passions. For instance, there's a connection in the brain, and I'm not sure if we mentioned in our last interview, in the right part of the brain that talks about desire for food, anger, and sex. Right? And we like to say if one of those areas of the brain is out of order, the other two are most likely going to be out of order. And so when we aren't living out our sexuality correctly, taking this example, Will flew off the handle, right? And again, I don't know all the details there, and just judging from the action here, some deep fire, a disintegrated fire was present there. And I think it was even more, if we can extrapolate some of the evidence, kind of maybe feeling a little cheated on the way in which things are going in his own marriage, and how his life is not going perhaps the way that he wants to. And somebody brings this out into the open. That you're rubbing on a sore spot, and obviously didn't respond well. So for us, especially as none of us are of the celebrity culture in a certain sense, Jim, but really for a lot of guys, right? What else is going on? What areas in our life are disordered? What areas in our life are out of control here? And if we are honest about it, how is our sexuality involved with that, right? If we're not, putting this place in the right place and allowing God especially to be a part of that and allow His grace to work there, we're going to start seeing some things in our life not match up with our public persona, not matching up with what's going on in our private lives. So these are things that need to be integrated, or there's going to be problems.
Yeah, Steve Pokorny is with us, freedom-coaching.net. We're going to be back with him in just a moment, but in the meantime, let's open up the phone lines. If you have any question or comment along these lines, feel free to call in 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. We'll be right back.
Are you holding on to an old car or truck because you think dealers won't want it? Then consider donating it to the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network. This is a great way to turn your unvalued vehicle into a powerful gift for Catholic radio. You'll be taking part in our evangelization efforts to continue spreading Christ's love throughout the world. Our Lord uses Catholic radio to draw more people to Himself, and one of the best ways to support the Station of the Cross is by contributing to our vehicle donation program. The process is safe and simple. Your generosity will greatly benefit our mission to bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners. To find out more or to donate your vehicle today, visit thestationofthecross.com or call 1-866-628-CARS. That's thestationofthecross.com or 1-866-628-2277.
This is Jesse Romero, host of Jesus 911, heard weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm joined each day by a variety of co-hosts like Ruben Nava, Paul Clay, Dan Schneider, and my amazing wife, Anita Romero. We tackle Catholic devotions, spiritual warfare, family life, saving America, and everything in between. Join us each weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for Jesus 911. You can also catch a bonus encore Saturdays at noon Eastern. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Love really indicates where our values are, where our priorities are, and it shows our true love of God.
You mentioned the thermometer of love, Father. In entry 343 of the diary, it begins, true love is measured by the thermometer of suffering.
Tune in for Divine Mercy in My Soul every Sunday morning at 11.
And catch the encore presentation every Tuesday evening at 8.
Jezu ufam Tobie.
Jesus, I trust in you.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Our guest today is Steve Pokorny, founder of Freedom Coaching, freedom-coaching.net, and author of Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture. And Steve, you've got 3 chapters in this section, part 2 of the book that we are focusing on today. The 3 chapters are Discovering the Divine Vision, Going Blind, and the fulfillment of all intimacy. So something of a 1, 2, 3 in the story arc here. So in chapter 5, Discovering the Divine Vision, so much here about going back to the beginning, understanding that in the beginning it was not so, and really going there for the information that we need to understand how to differentiate here between what we are maybe thinking is a freshwater well, but is actually a septic tank in terms of our pornified culture, as you call it. If we can go back to the beginning and see how it was in the beginning, that is going to help us to understand who we really are, who God really is, what are we called to. It's going to get us to these fundamental truths that we need to really understand to be able to live this well, to see this well, discover this divine vision. So much in that chapter. What do you want to hone in on as most essential to lift out to help people to understand how it was in the beginning?
Sure. So if you're watching the video, by the way, where Jim is at, and he's got a beautiful picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the background. And for anybody who knows about Our Lady, she is very important to us, and obviously Our Lady of Guadalupe. And if you had a colorblind friend who you were trying to describe perfectly these images, these colors, excuse me, how would you do it? In a certain sense, you can maybe use analogies, things like that, but to get them to see perfectly the colors, it wouldn't happen. So this is the same metaphor that I'd like to use as a jumping off point, Jim, in our conversation in this segment, is we have gone blind. We have left completely Eden, what Adam and Eve had in the beginning. And we're grasping, shall we say, using the other analogy of the septic tank, these places trying to satisfy these deep, deep thirst for love in our soul, in our heart, in our bodies. And we can never return back without help back to the beginning, right? Only by grace to a real degree. And we're going to get to that in the third element of this section that we're talking about here. And so what Jesus Christ does, he comes to restore our redeemed vision by pointing us back to the beginning. Because if all we see is the bad news, right? The bad news is very apparent with Ukraine and shootings in San Diego and even crisis among our celebrity culture with Will Smith and Chris Rock, right? We might think it's all broken. It's all bad news. And that's not the message of Christianity. That's not the message of Catholicism. The message of Catholicism is we were created beautiful. We have experienced a fall, but we can, through a recovery of the divine vision, we can receive a redeemed vision to see the goodness of our bodies, the goodness of sexuality, and it paints a path for how we live this. And if we think through just the world we live in, right, the pornified culture, it tells us that the way in which we are to get along with members of the other sex is through the lens of lust. And that's either through manipulation or lustful behavior. This is our way to happiness. But for those of us who have drunk from this septic tank, we know that it's bankrupt. We know there's got to be more here. So what we want to do is, by going back to the beginning, see what did Adam and Eve have that we are missing out here? What was the beautiful point of our first parents, of how man and woman were to be in the beginning? And again, this jumps off to a whole bunch of different elements here, right? Just the whole example right now of saying that we were created male and female in our day and age is controversial. Why? Because you have various agendas that are literally demonic, that are trying to destroy the image of God in which we were made in. And when we destroy the image of God, right, we start to destroy the way in which we are failing to see God himself. All of this is an attack on creation, on the creator himself. So we need to get back to what was God's original intention and original plan for humanity. And that even if we find that we're broken here, there's a redeemer here who can restore us and renew us and redeem us and bring us a grace even greater than what Adam and Eve had in the beginning.
Steve Pokorny is with us, freedom-coaching.net. Phone lines are open if you have any question or comment on our topic today. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. And there is so much in the book. You really go step by step through an understanding of humanity and the truths that are most essential for us to really lock in on. But let me go to this one. You say, quote, "We need to reflect on God's original plan for nakedness, as it is the key to overcoming the pornified vision that affects us all." End of quote. What can you tell us there that we really need to understand?
So, Jim, and for all the guys out there, next party you go to, all right, first 3 minutes of the conversation, just throw the word naked into the conversation, right? Even a good, wholesome Catholic conversation, and watch the room explode. It's because most people, when they hear the term naked, they hear the term lust or pornography or unchaste behavior. And John Paul the Great, he said that in order to understand original humanity, you have to understand original nakedness, not the nakedness like we understand it through the pornified lens. Because if we go back to the beginning, this is, again, my brothers and sisters, why it's so important for us to return back to the beginning. Because if we're judging the world by the world standards, we're never going to recover the way in which we're called to live. We're never going to attain what we're looking for. But when we can start to see things through God's lens, then huge things happen. So from the beginning, Adam and Eve were naked without shame. Think about your own understanding of the body, your own understanding of other people's bodies, your own understanding of growing up, just of the issue of nakedness itself. For a vast majority of us, it's coupled with shame. Shame is that notion where I believe I'm a bad person with no inherent worth, that I don't have value. And so this is why you have in certain circles, or even in certain Catholic circles, where you have certain mothers in front of their daughters making comments about their own bodies, saying, "Oh man, that I wish I didn't have that love handle," or "I've got a little too much cellulite here," or "that dress doesn't fit right here on my body." And there's these judgments here. Whereas from the beginning, Adam and Eve, when they saw the body, they saw the body of the other, it wasn't through the lens of lust. It was through the lens of genuine love, where Adam and Eve saw each other and perfectly loved each other. And think about it, Jim, right? When you're walking down the street, and we can ask all people, but you're the one I'm talking to, so I'll pick on you, right? When you're walking down the street, do we not want somebody to see us for the good of who we are and acknowledge that goodness? Of course we do. But, and again, I'll pick on you, Jim, right? If everyone saw you for the goodness of who you are, right, and they were expressing this, what would that do for you?
Yeah, well, I think it would affirm the goodness that I have.
Yeah, the goodness of who you really are. And this is not the way most people are living their life, right? And I think especially as a lot of this connects with social media, a lot of the comparison games. I have to have the perfect image on Instagram, or I'm not going to be loved, or TikTok, or whatever social media you're on, or a lot of the Generation Xers on Facebook and whatever. And there's the comparison game, and a lot of women especially fall into this as well, and begin to question the goodness of their own identity. Because the reality is, Jim, we are made in the image of God, and I think for a lot of Catholics, even now, we get caught up that identity is primarily a spiritual reality. But in a certain sense, if you stay in merely spirituality, that in essence is incomplete, and even could be bordering on heresy, because we are incarnational. Our bodies reveal the goodness of our personhood, of who we are. We are body-soul composites, and our very bodies, even our nakedness, reveals this goodness. And the tough notion about this is because of original sin, because there's brokenness, our bodies, like, we find them breaking down. You and I, Jim, we're in our 40s now. We're noticing gray hairs coming in. I remember another Catholic speaker, Christopher West, recently on an interview, he was talking about these black things coming out of his nose, right? On the top of his nose, he tried to pull them. They're really painful, right? The reality of death is all around us, but we must not conflate the fact that we see brokenness here in the body, the fact that the body itself can be used as an object, treated as an object itself. It in no way does it cover over the plan of God. And for our challenge is how, and the question is to ask, how are we seeing ourselves? How are we seeing others? And how are we entering into this view that Adam and Eve had, and that Jesus Christ calls us to have now with the people that we encounter every day?
Mm-hmm. So tell us kind of the opposite of that. So when that's not happening, right, when we're not really seeing each other in that way, affirming the good of one another, believing in our own goodness, what happens then?
Yeah, the key word is use, right? This is a word that we need to use a whole lot more. We use one another. The opposite of love. If love is to be a gift, to be a true and genuine, sincere gift for others, the opposite is to use another person as a means of one's own selfish gratification. And obviously, unchaste behavior, pornographic use, falls absolutely in that of using another person as a means of one's own selfish sexual gratification, where I will go and try to get something from someone rather than make that gift of self. And this is a violation on so many levels of the dignity of the human person, and especially the violation of the principles of beauty and the violation of life itself. Father Brian Bransfield, who I quote in the book, says that the meaning of life is to give beauty slowly and not to acquire pleasure quickly. But is this not what we're being told in our movies, our magazines, our television shows, the stuff online, that it's all about us? You know, how can all of our media is pointing towards the iPhone, everything on there? This becomes a me generation. So instead here, when we are using another person, it is harming the other person, it's harming ourselves, and it's harming any potentiality for a genuine relationship. And if we are in the process of using other people, and this has been what we've been programmed into, on the times in which we need to make that gift of self, it's going to be nearly impossible to do that. And this is what's the most tragic. We are literally forfeiting our very meaning of our being in existence.
So what happens in a culture then, like the one we're in, where we have sexual perversions that are taking place, that are an embodiment of lust, and they're being sold to us under the package of love, that this is what love is. You have to accept this because it's love. What does that do?
Oh, the fallout is in many ways, right? The focus here is, as long as you don't get, my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth, right? There's no real simple truth. It's just whatever it goes with. As long as we're just getting along, then we'll be fine. But if you get in my way, I just might kill you. Is this not what's behind the philosophy of Planned Parenthood? Or, if sexuality itself is just to be an expression of whatever I want to do, well, then this is where same-sex behavior comes in. This is where contraception comes in. This is where we allow for masturbation and pornography to come in. All the breakdowns that are here that are, if we're truly honest, these don't satisfy. You can drink from the septic tank all you want. It'll never get you the fresh water that you're looking for. And if we're left to those designs, if we're left to merely using one another, and this is what is pushed by the pornographic culture, then we'll never find the fulfillment of what we're looking for. But the good news is, Jim, and we'll talk about this after the break, there is really good news to satisfy the deep, deep ache that we all have.
Absolutely. Steve Picorni is with us. The phone number is 1-877-511-5483. Any question or comment you have for us today, talking about Steve's book, Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture. And you can get it at freedom-coaching.net. Again, the lines are open, 1-877-511-5483. We'll be right back.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. Americans tuned into pro-life social media sources over the weekend are still recovering from what was uncovered in the nation's capital last week. A Washington, D.C. abortion worker became a whistleblower and turned evidence over to pro-life activists before those activists were arrested by FBI agents Thursday. Progressive anti-abortion uprising members engaged in civil disobedience at the Washington Surgeon Center, which advertises late-term abortions at 27-plus weeks of pregnancy. The deceased bodies of 5 children suggest that federal laws that both prohibit partial birth abortions and which require care for children who survive abortions may be being violated. This is Life News Radio. Another in a long line of almost weekly studies claims to find great safety in do-it-yourself, at-home, mail-order abortion pills. But because this study and some before it ignore large numbers of respondents who become unreachable, Dr. Randall O'Bannon of National Right to Life cries foul. Simple Criticism asks if disappearing respondents reflect women with poor outcomes. This is Life News Radio. In other stories,
A study from a University of Oxford researcher disputes claims that decriminalizing abortion saves women's lives. A new national poll in the Wall Street Journal shows a majority of Americans favor banning abortions after 15 weeks gestation. State 15-week bans on abortion are at the heart of the Dobbs v. Jackson case currently awaiting a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court. And 40 Days for Life is nearing the end of its spring campaign. With multiple reports of abortion workers quitting, the focus will soon turn to training next fall's 40 Days volunteers and leaders. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Steve Pokorny. He is founder of Freedom Coaching. That is freedom-coaching.net. He's also author of Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture. You can get it at freedom-coaching.net. Again, phone lines are open. Any question or comment you might have for us today, 1-877-511-5483. Two questions I want to get in before we get to that third chapter in this section, the fulfillment of all intimacy, one from each of the preceding chapters before. So from discovering the divine vision, one question I do want to ask you, Steve, is this. I think it's a big question that's out there that many people grapple with, and that is, especially I think many dads perhaps that might be listening, how do they speak to their children about this? And that is something you write about here on page 196, the real meaning of the sexual act. Right. So this is a comprehensive thing that we need to understand a whole lot surrounding it to really be able to teach this in a million different ways, in age appropriate ways, all the way up to some sort of talk, I guess. But it shouldn't just be one talk. It should be a process of formation into a lot of stuff. But what can you share just for anybody that might be listening that maybe just doesn't get it on a basic level? Why not? Why not, if two people love each other, can't they engage in this sexual act? Why does it have to be within marriage? Our culture is so far gone down the road on this one. People who are in the culture might just have a hard time even understanding that this can actually be true, that the sexual act is meant for marriage.
Excellent question. So with any of these, any fathers who are listening to this, and even mothers also who are listening to this, any of these very challenging questions at times regarding issues of sexuality always start with love. Always start with this understanding, right? And our culture, again, the pornified culture paints the idea that love is love. Well, for anybody, for basic philosophy, you can't define a word with a word. It just doesn't work. It's poor. It's poor ideas. It's just poor philosophy and poor formation here. Okay, and I guess behind that is the notion that we don't want to hurt people's feelings, but the truth itself convicts, right? And the truth itself calls us to convert. It calls us to become more. And why? Because the truth is not a thing or an idea. The truth is a person. The truth is Jesus Christ, who is the fullness of love. So let's dig into this. What do we mean by love? So love is not merely a feeling. When you ground your kid, I promise you're going to have strong feelings, but at the end of the day, do you still love them? Of course. And this happens, I don't know, maybe sometimes 3 times a week in my house. My kids, no, I'm just kidding. It's 4 times. But within that, sometimes they need it. So love can't be merely a feeling. It's got to go beyond that. So based on this notion, love is gift. How can I make that gift of self? And there's 4 elements connected to this idea of love. And what is it? It's 4 parts. So love must first be free. Love must be freely given and freely received. God creates us not as robots. He creates us that we can freely choose him or choose to reject him. And that's a risk that's put out there. And I think a lot of people have been hurt, especially in relationships, and hurt. And we speak this notion of we want free love, but at the end of the day, it's something less than freedom. And we find that when we're misusing the gift of our sexuality, we don't end up more free, but we end up enslaved. And then second is that of total. It has to be a total giving of self, giving all of myself to another person in this. And when we aren't doing that, it's a form of spiritual contraception. I'm holding back a major part of myself that needs to happen. It needs to be given over to the other because they are due that, because that's what love doesn't want just a small part, but wants all of it. Third element is that of fidelity, right? It's not that of I want to love you just for a couple of weeks and then dump you. No, I'm here. I want love forever. I'm forever yours faithfully. Right? Anybody from Journey age in the 1970s? I just dated myself. Right? We want that forever. It's in our hearts, our music, our movies. Right? We long for this. This is what the whole ridiculous Twilight series was all about years ago. Right? So we want love to go on forever. Critically important. And if it's not, then it's counterfeit. And then the fourth element is that of fruitfulness. We want something more to come from it. In a dating situation, it's not just about knowing a person's name and then enjoying a bunch of feelings with them. We want to go deep into that relationship. And because every person is unique and unrepeatable, that relationship, taken in the right sense, will never bottom out. So long way around that way. So you take those four elements: free, total, faithful, fruitful. We find in the Catholic Church, when a man and woman stand before the altar of God, those four elements are expressed in the sacrament of marriage, right? Where they're asked three questions. First, do you come here freely and without reservation? Second question, do you promise to be faithful to each other the rest of your life? And third, do you promise to be open to children and to bring them up according to the law of Christ and his church? And you'll notice here, those vows, if we just take those four elements of love, I didn't mention God at all, but it has everything to do with the way in which Christ loves us. Christ loves us faithfully. He says, no one forces me to do it. I lay it down freely. He says, I'm with you totally. There's no greater love than this, than a man lays down his life for his friends. He says, I'm with you faithfully. I will never abandon you. I will be with you forever. And he says, faithfully, I came that they may have life and life to the full. So what we find is, on a basic human level, we long for this, and this is what we long for in marriage. And then this is where we get to the beauty of Catholicism, is the sacrament of marriage, is where God's grace is operating in that relationship. Because if you are a man or a woman, and you're trying to live this out, to play house, that grace isn't there. And this is why we have a breakdown in these relationships. But when God's presence is there, even if there's arguments, we're going to have a power that we're going to be able to draw from, a strength that the world cannot give. And when we have this, then the beauty's there. And this is where the gift of marital intercourse is. It is called marital intercourse because it's marital, it's marriage, and it is to be part of the glue that binds a husband and wife together and opens them up to a diaper-clad sleep enthusiast many times over, like Jim and myself have done. It's a great gift. And it's only in doing it in the proper order. This is the hierarchy, a sacred order, that we find the joy, the peace, the energy, the excitement that's supposed to be there. Instead, what we find, a lot of people in the pornified culture simply are pursuing this for mere pleasure at the expense of other people. People are getting hurt. People are literally dying through things like abortion or trafficking, and it's ruining the lives in many cases.
Steve Picorni is with us, author of Redeemed Visions, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture. Freedom-coaching.net is where to get it. If you have a question, you can call in 1-877-511-5483. But Steve, you write here that a man who has not been trained to recognize the real dignity of a woman will find it impossible to truly enter into a healthy relationship with her. You go on to say that, especially if we have been programmed by the pornified vision of reality, this obsessive pursuit of pleasure fails to fulfill, as we are not really looking for sex, but intimacy. So isn't this such a key point? And you go into it at length in the book. Help us to understand this, how important it is, this desire for what we're really after, this desire for intimacy.
Yeah, so sex is not intimacy, right? I think we've limited our gaze. If you look at, for instance, you look on one hand, if you look at movie posters, like what's the rating on the movie, and it says rated R, and it might say sexuality, and people often think that, well, it has to do with, there's gonna be unchaste behavior in that movie, pretty much. Well, sexuality in truth has to do with male and female, and in the terms of sexuality from a Catholic perspective, oftentimes when we say this word, a lot of Catholics hear, again, pardon the language, genital intimacy, simply what we do with our genitals. And if we're limiting intimacy to that area of our body, then I think we're missing out on the fullness of what God wants from us. Just like Adam, and this is why we go back to Adam and Eve, moves from isolation, from a solitude, to communio, to communion with others. So we must do the same thing. And think about so many guys, especially, this is what's critical. I like to say a minority in the sense of the fact that I'm a part of a men's council. These are men coming together. We're focused on marriage and family. And this is a critical thing for my own formation, because again, I can get myself on my own high horse if I don't have other men calling me out for my BS and my nonsense. Really important. And in that relationship with these other men, we have intimacy. Does it mean we've had sex? No. We're married to our wives, and we're committed to this. But it's genuine intimacy. It's the same intimacy. It's the closeness that the beloved disciple had with Jesus. He puts his head on the breast of Jesus. It was not intercourse or anything like that going on between the two of them. And what it is, it's a nakedness without shame, a bearing of the soul. And so many of us, especially when there's shame there, when we live it out our bodies and sexuality, we fail to live that as gift. We've been involved with pornography or masturbation or anything like this. We fail to attain the intimacy we're looking for. So what we want more is not mere pleasure. We want somebody to see us, to love us for who we are, and that we can reciprocate this. And ultimately, this ultimate intimacy is found in Jesus Christ, who wants to give us our deepest desires here. But that means that we have to let go of the way in which we've been holding on to life. Let go of our apparent control and say, Jesus, I want to let you in. I want to let you fully in, because you, Lord, I've been around this world. I've been involved in maybe multi-million bank mergers and gone to Vegas, and I've done all these things, but it doesn't satisfy. So right now, Lord, I'm open. I'm open to whatever you have for me, because I know, Lord, that you have the words of everlasting life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that gets us into chapter 7, the fulfillment of all intimacy, this well of fresh water that we truly desire, which is Jesus himself. He comes for us. He comes for our hearts on a rescue mission. What do you want to tell us about this unbelievably wonderful good news?
Oh man, imagine if we could just stay here for forever and talk about this. Well, that we'd be in heaven, and welcome to it. We're pointing towards it, right? So if we take that analogy of the septic tank, right? If only we had the eyes to see it. In our own yard is a well, and the well is not just a well, but the well is a person. It's Jesus Christ, and He come not to just give us He's coming to give us the fresh water, and fresh water is the Holy Spirit. He's come to filter out all the crap, all the stuff that we've drunk in from the world we live in, and to really satisfy the deepest desires of our heart. And for so many of us who, again, who've been living on our sexuality, which is supposed to be pointed towards gift, and we've been doing this for, shall we say, many, many years. And I was there, my brothers who are hearing this, I was there for over 12 years and thinking, I can never be set free. Or like a woman going to confession week after week, hearing that she's forgiven, but couldn't forgive herself because of the great evil that she had participated in. But hearing God has forgiven her, we need to enter into this. And He wants to give us what we're really looking for, okay? And I use this analogy, especially the well is in our yard, where we've been in the Catholic Church, and many of us have never heard this language, but this has been a part of our Catholic faith forever. We're called to enter into what is God's plan for our sexuality. And if you think the images and those late night moments are exciting, well, you know what's so exciting? Even more, Jim, just one analogy is when I'm in my room, it's late at night, and my daughters or whatever, or early morning come to open up my door, and they find me praying. Right? There's no shame there, of, hey, what's going on, right? Where I'm tapping the genuine intimacy here. And then I get to be on the I've been working on my phone or working on my computer, and they want to go play outside, right? I don't have to worry about, them seeing anything on my computer, or what I can do is just close the computer, go outside, we're going to throw the softball around. Right? That's it's moving us again from that isolation to communio. It's critically important. Christ has a brand new path for you. He has come to make all things new, especially our sexuality, which is tied to the deepest core of who we are. And the biggest message to convey here is this is what every single man and woman is called to. And all we have to do first and foremost is say yes to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're about to hit the hard break, but anything else you want to say to anybody who's hearing this and they think sounds good, but not for me. I'm too far gone. They just doubt their own goodness. They doubt the goodness of God. What do you speak to them?
Well, to quote Father Chad Rippencher, if you're saying that you're not good enough, well, I hate to say, or you can't be forgiven, you're just not that special. Okay, God has come to redeem you. This is where we are at, right? We're getting close to Easter. This is the Holy Week. This is the week of the bridegroom. The bridegroom has come to rescue his bride that's described in the scriptures as a prostitute. And he's come to love that bride, to divorce that bride of any of those chains that were there before, and to bring them home. You, my brothers and sisters, are an image of that bride to come home, to be wed to him forever. And it starts here on this earth now.
Great time right now to come on home to Jesus and his Catholic Church. And a great time for any questions or comments as we go into the final break, the final segment. 1-877-511-5483. Anything you have for us today, last chance. 1-877-511-5483. We'll be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for April 4th. Today we celebrate Saint Isidore of Seville. Some people manage to thrive under difficult conditions. Today's saint is one of those people. Born in mid-6th century Spain, Isidore received a fine education at the hands of his brother. Years later, Isidore became known as the schoolmaster of the Middle Ages. He is also known for his contributions to the church and culture of Spain in a period of great conflict. The Visigoths had invaded Spain 150 years earlier and established their own capital. Though Christian, they followed the heresy of Arianism, which denied the divinity of Christ. Isidore converted many of the Visigoths and made Spain a center of culture and learning. As Archbishop of Seville, he strengthened the seminary system and founded schools that taught every branch of learning. His own writings were voluminous, including a history of the world. Devoted to the poor throughout his life, Isidore increased his charities as he aged. He prepared for his death by giving away all his possessions. In his final months, his house was filled from morning till night with poor people seeking his help. He died in 636. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
Help bring many more people closer to our Lord by letting them know about Catholic Radio. One of the simplest ways to promote Catholic Radio is by displaying a bumper magnet on your car. Order your free bumper magnets at thestationofthecross.com. We'd be happy to send bumper magnets for your listening area so that others can come to know the Lord. That's the stationofthecross.com. Thank you for sharing Catholic Radio on the road.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Our guest today is Steve Picorni. He is founder of Freedom Coaching, freedom-coaching.net, author of Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture. All right, down the stretch we go. I think just one last question I ought to get in here, and that is something along the lines of, there's a theme that you have going on in the book as well, where, you want to try to make sure that that you're hitting all sides of things. And there is a side of things where sometimes people in their desire to want to get it right might end up seeing it quite wrongly, in the sense of saying that somehow our sexuality is bad, or somehow sexual attraction is bad and needs to be repressed, or something like that. And that's oftentimes that folks who are pushing the septic tank, they want to try to say, well, that's what the church is doing. They're just trying to repress your sexual desire. But you make a great case in here, helping us to understand the truth of it all, right? That we are after a life of purity. And I would say that this ought to be a passionate purity, right? A passionate purity. So help us to understand the right understanding here and the freedom to love that we are called to.
So to quote the newest doctrine of the church, the glory of God is man fully alive in Christ Jesus. And we can say in a certain sense, if People magazine has the sexiest man alive, well, then Jesus Christ should be on the cover every year. Okay. And everybody loses out. Sorry, apologies to Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, right? In this here, why? Because sexuality is the expression of our masculinity or femininity, a call to love. Right. And there's been the false notion where sexuality is something bad and dirty and gross, or to quote a popular band, which name eludes me at this point. Right. I learned growing up in Lubbock, Texas, and I'm in San Antonio, so this is close to home. I learned in Lubbock, Texas, that sex is something bad, dirty, and wrong, and you should only save it for the one that you love. Well, this is the mixed message that a lot of people are given, right? And we're told from our pornified culture that regarding sexuality, there's just two options that we have. One is that of we stuff and repress this, right? We don't feel it. Don't go there. You know what happens. Go Elsa on that from Frozen, right? Don't feel, conceal. Don't do that, because if you revealed this, people wouldn't accept it. Right. And this is the whole notion of hide in the closet. That's on one element. That's what you have to do. Well, we're literally, Jim, we're dealing with something that is the ability to create new human life. And you can only stuff that long enough until it explodes. And that becomes a diving in, shall we say, into the septic tank. And from this perspective, if that's, and we know what happens from that, the ugliness, the brokenness, it may feel good or seem good or appear good in the beginning of that, but it's going to make us sick. And then we can only drink from the septic tank long enough till we start throwing up. And then what do? We say, all right, that was a mistake. I should go back to stuffing. I can't bring that out into public. I can't just don't go there. Don't even think about that. And again, it builds and builds and explodes things here. So we move from this place of repression to indulgence and back again. And this is how we lose ourselves. This is what we call sexual insanity, where we're not really fully living out perfectly ourselves. And if it's a choice between what is the dehydration, shall we say, on one hand, and drinking the septic tank on the other, which looks more attractive? Obviously, the drink from the septic tank does. At least I'm drinking something, but it's still going to make us sick. And if we're looking from the religious perspective, right, dehydration versus drinking the septic tank, which looks holier? Well, stuff it. Don't go there, right? Well, both of those are an error, because we're called to have this passion-filled life, right? We're supposed to have passion-filled marriages in a good way, but to live out this in joy. It's joy that is the biggest way of living out our faith. And the quickest way to kill joy is to be trapped in bodily shame, which is especially what the pornified culture brings. So what's the answer here? The answer here is sexual integration, where I give these desires over to Jesus Christ and allow him to transform me. And through the way in which I live my life, the way in which I see people, it begins to transform other people's lives. So just a very practical way to bring this out, right? When we are seeing a person who might inspire lust in our hearts, that might have moved us there, instead of running away and not looking or indulging them in lust, instead, I see them as a person. And I pray a simple prayer. Lord Jesus, thank you for the gift of this person. Thank you for the gift of my sexuality. Thank you for my attraction to this person. May you bless her as the woman of who she is. May she see herself as a beloved daughter of God. And may every man who sees her see them as a beloved daughter. This is a very different approach, because the lie that I mean, there's something to be said for custody of the eyes, right? We have to do that, but we are also given eyes to see. And I want to see with a pure heart, because purity, this is fulfilling Matthew 5:8. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God revealed in and through the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot in this final section. I wish we could flush it all out. This final chapter, the fulfillment of all intimacy, in this section 2 of the book that we're going through today here with Steve Pokorny. But only a few minutes left to go. Steve, what else do you want to hit before we close up today?
Yeah. So one other big element, right? If it's, and we'll talk more about this next month and as we wrap up the book, but as we're talking about this, right? If we've gone blind, right? Adam and Eve had the divine vision in the beginning. We've gone blind because of sin. Jesus Christ comes to redeem our vision, comes to help us to see ourselves as good, helps us see the goodness of others in very important ways. And one of the big ways we can begin doing this is through two elements that are intrinsic to the Catholic Church. Number one is that of the sacrament of confession. Go to confession. Be not afraid. Now is the hour of salvation. Now is the time of redemption. Go see him, right? It's here we're able to go into a little box, be honest, and we'll hear the most beautiful words of all, that you are my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased, right? He wants to transform all of this in us, right? And especially if we've been dealing with a sin for many, many years, don't stop going. You need that grace, right? But we also, especially when we're talking about sexual sin, right, which is deeply, and why it's so insidious, it directly affects us as a person, right? Very important. So one of the things that was a major part of my own healing journey was that of spending lots of time in Eucharistic adoration. So not just receiving Jesus in the Eucharist at liturgy, but also receiving Jesus when he is present to me. He is naked and unashamed in the Eucharist, where I come and bare my soul to him and allow him to see me. And just like if we were getting a suntan, if I was getting a suntan, just being present there I'm going to begin to become infected by this. And because his love and his grace are seen into me, this is the genuine intimacy we're looking for. And then if I can add a third piece to this is come to know the most beautiful woman ever. If you could make your mother, how would you make her? Perfect. And so every woman is in the image of the Blessed Mother. And by coming into contact, coming into union with this of hearts, with the Blessed Mother, with Mary, and coming to know her and coming to see her in love, her gentle feminine love, real feminine love, she's the most beautiful woman, most attractive woman ever, is going to help us to take that vision and begin to show honor and worth to every woman we encounter, regardless of how that woman may be dressed or acting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very, very good. And any preview you want to give us for next month? We're going to be getting into part 3, The Cure, Redeeming Our Vision. Anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah, so we'll pick up with a story next time, but let me give you a little story here. So there's a young boy of 9 years of age. He is out eating with his family at a picnic, and he comes upon one of these dirty pictures. He brings it immediately to his older sister, who says, bring it to your older brother. Older brother takes that picture, rips it up, and says, you don't need to be looking at that. So 2 dangling questions for you are, 1, how did he immediately go to his older sister? And 2, how did the older brother immediately go and rip up that picture and throw it away? Why did that happen? Well, tune in next time and you'll find out.
All right, we'll get to that next month with Steve Pokorny. Again, you can find him at freedom-coaching.net, and you can get the book Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture there at the website as well, freedom-coaching.net. Steve, great blessing always to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my brother Jim. God bless.
God bless you.